first hearing, we have had the Secretary Carter and Chairman Dunford together in their current roles. And I think it's appropriate for it to be on this topic, which is foremost in the minds of the American people. I want to thank you both for being here and also take this opportunity to thank each of you for your services in a variety of roles. It's my view that we are fortunate to have you with us. And all that has been written and said about ISIS since the Paris attack, there seems to be widespread consensus on at least 3 points. One is that ISIS presents a significant threat to the United States. 2, the approach we have used to degrade and destroy ISIS is inadequate to meet that threat. And 3, a different approach, a greater effort is required. While in many ways ISIS is more capable than al-Qaeda, it is certainly not invincible. Yet when we tie our own hands and use half measures against them, it enhances their prestige and aids their cause. As Dr. Henry Kissinger wrote 6 weeks ago, the current inconclusive U.S. military effort risks serving as a recruitment vehicle for ISIS, as having stood up to American might. And David Ignatius wrote more recently, but the halfway measures taken by the U.S. thus far have only helped the jihadists. The other consequence of such half measures is that it adds to the doubts that allies or potential allies have about our commitment and about our willingness to see the mission through. Hank Crumpton, who led CIA's Afghanistan campaign after 9/11, wrote about ISIS earlier this year, "Many have lost faith in U.S. leadership. The perception of U.S. weakness and lack of strategic direction dissuades allies from policy and intelligence cooperation." I believe that a greater military effort must be run by the military. And I got to say, Secretary Carter, all 3 of your Obama administration predecessors have complained openly about White House aides micromanaging military operations. I myself have heard some of these instances from commanders in the field, instances that I don't think would have happened at any other time in our history. If we're going to be serious about ISIS, the President needs to assign the military a clear mission and then allow the military to carry it out. I believe there should be a 4-star headquarters in the region that's fully empowered to take the steps necessary to degrade ISIS now. Former Undersecretary of Defense for Intelligence Mike Vickers made good sense to me when he wrote about 10 days ago, quote, "Whatever we would do if ISIL made good on its threat to attack Washington and New York, we should do it now before the attack occurred." Well, maybe Kissinger, Ignatius, Crumpton, and Vickers are all wrong and the President has things contained and well in hand, but I don't think so. And we are looking to you two gentlemen not to repeat White House talking points, but to give us your best professional military judgment on what's required to actually degrade and defeat this enemy and protect our people. Mr. Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Secretary Carter and General Dunford, for being here today to talk about this incredibly important topic. And I agree with the Chairman. There is no question that ISIS is a clear threat that we need to be confronted. They are, I think, without question, the greatest national security threat that we face right now. It is important to keep in context that that threat is not just ISIS. It was al-Qaeda, now it's ISIS. It is part of a broader ideology that we need to confront, that we've seen spread throughout the Middle East and North Africa and South Asia in many different forms. Ansar al-Sharia in Libya, al-Shabaab in Somalia, Boko Haram in Nigeria. We need to figure out how to confront and defeat that threat. And there is no question that ISIS remains a grave threat to Western targets as well as to stability in the Middle East. That said, I don't think the picture is quite as bleak as the Chairman portrayed it. In fact, there was just an article yesterday about how ISIS is beginning to lose some of their supporters because their momentum has been stopped in terms of gathering territory. One of the biggest selling points that they had from the very beginning was, unlike al-Qaeda, they held territory. And they were growing at one time in terms of the territory they held, so they could recruit people saying, we are truly going to build an Islamic State. Well, they have not gained any territory. They've lost, actually, a few towns. And the bombing campaign that we have committed, and primarily the work of the Kurds, has rolled them back in certain places and has undermined that confidence in the jihadists that they are, in fact, just going to roll forward and take everything. That's a positive. However, the chairman's absolutely correct. It's not enough. It is not enough to contain ISIS because, as we've seen in Paris, in Beirut, and elsewhere, as long as they exist, they can launch attacks. We must put together a clear strategy to defeat them. And that is the other thing that I will agree with the chairman on, perhaps not quite as strongly, but the administration does need to be clearer in saying what that strategy is and that they are absolutely committed to it. I actually think they have a better strategy and a more comprehensive strategy than at times they have said. Let us not forget that the President said, I think less than a year ago, we don't yet have a strategy. That's the kind of thing that doesn't need to be said. We need a much clearer message about what that strategy is, but I think we have it. And that strategy is that we're going to use our military force in combination with as many allies as possible to try and help our allies in the region. But that is the key point. We could send 50,000 U.S. troops into Iraq and Syria, and in short order, I'm sure, clear out a good portion of what is now ISIS. But what we also know from experience in Iraq and Afghanistan is if a Western force came in and tried to pacify or mollify this part of the world, another terrorist organization would grow up in a heartbeat, or ISIS would reconstitute itself and present itself as the alternative to, as the only people defending Muslims against Western aggression. So I hope we don't overreact, because what we need, the only way we win this fight, is if we find Sunni allies in the region who are willing to lead that fight. That is what we have to do. And also part of this is removing Assad from power. Because as long as Assad is in power, that is another rallying call for ISIS to fight against a brutal dictator who is oppressing their people. So that's the trick that we have. ISIS is fighting Assad, but we need to defeat both Assad and ISIS. And again, I think this notion that U.S. military might is simply going to show up and fix the problem has been disproven by what has happened. Understand what gives these groups their greatest force. What gives them their greatest force is when they can stand up and say, we are defending Islam against Western aggression. If all we have is Western aggression, we will never win. We have to use our force, we have to work with our allies in the region, but at the end of the day, what we need is Sunni allies to carry this fight. And that means that we have to continue to put pressure on the Baghdad government to bring Sunnis in. And that's the biggest thing that created ISIS was, Prime Minister Maliki and now al-Abadi have both decided to run a sectarian Shia government. So the Sunnis may not like ISIS, but as between that and being allied with a Shiite Iran-backed government, they choose ISIS. So that's what I think we need to do. Yes, we need to have a clearer strategy. We need to state it more clearly and rally our allies. But I hope we don't fall into the trap of thinking that U.S. military might is what's going to solve this problem. It is a far more complicated problem than that. And with that, I look forward to the testimony from the witnesses and the questions. I thank the chairman. I yield back.
Thank you. Mr. Secretary, Chairman Dunford, again, thank you for being here, but more importantly, thank you for the service that you are providing the nation in very difficult jobs in very difficult times. And I don't think any of us underestimate the challenge that's before you. Mr. Secretary, you're recognized.
Thank you very much, Chairman Thornberry, Ranking Member Smith, all the members of this committee. Thank you for inviting me to discuss with Chairman Joe Dunford our counter-military strategy and its execution. And Chairman, I agree with you. We do need greater effort. We're applying greater effort. I'm going to try to describe some of the ways that we're doing that. And Mr. Smith, the underlying strategy and its clarity, I'll try to provide that clarity today. Now, ISIL's attacks in Paris, like those they've perpetrated elsewhere, were barbaric, and they were an assault on the civilization we defend. ISIL requires, and it will receive, a lasting defeat. The The President had directed us to intensify and adapt the military campaign before the Paris attacks, and will describe those new actions today. We continue to accelerate our efforts in the wake of Paris, and we're urging others to do the same, because those attacks further highlighted the stakes that not just the United States, but the world has in this fight. As I've discussed with you in the past, the United States strategy requires leveraging all of the components of our nation's might to destroy ISIL. Every instrument of national power, diplomatic, military, intelligence, law enforcement, homeland security, economic, informational, is engaged, and every national security agency is contributing to one of the strategy's lines of efforts. We're defending the homeland, acting to defeat ISIL in its core in Syria and Iraq, and taking appropriate action wherever else in the world this evil organization metastasizes. Now, the Defense Department contributes to nearly all the lines of effort, but protecting the homeland is among our highest priorities. We're adapting to meet ISIL's threat, including assuring the security of Defense Department installations and personnel. And just last week, I hosted some of the top national security and law enforcement leaders at the Pentagon to discuss efforts to cut off the flow of foreign fighters. But we at the Defense Department, of course, are also centrally responsible for the military campaign, which will be the focus of my statement to this committee. Through our own action and those of our coalition partners, the military campaign will destroy ISIL's leadership and forces, deprive it of resources and safe haven and mobility, all the while we seek to identify and then enable motivated local forces on the ground to expel ISIL from its territory, hold and govern it, and ensure that victory sticks. That's the right strategic approach for two principal reasons. First, it emphasizes the necessity of capable, motivated local forces as the only force that can assure a lasting victory. Such forces are hard to find, but they do exist. And we are enabling them, and we're constantly looking for and finding effective ways to expand doing so. And I'll describe some of them. But we cannot substitute for such forces. And second, this strategic approach sets the conditions for a political solution to the civil war in Syria and to crippling sectarianism in Iraq, which are the only durable ways to prevent a future ISIL-like organization from reemerging. And that's why the diplomatic work led by Secretary Kerry and the State Department is the first and absolutely critical line of effort in our strategy. We're gathering momentum on the battlefield in Syria and Iraq, and today I'll describe how the U.S. is continuing to accelerate the military campaign against ISIL, and what more we're asking of our global partners. While I can't describe everything in this unclassified setting, I do want to take a few extra minutes this morning to give as much detail as possible about the new things we're doing to accelerate ISIL's defeat. We're at war. We're using the might of the finest fighting force the world has ever known. Tens of thousands of U.S. personnel are operating in the broader Middle East region, more on the way. We have some of our most advanced air and naval forces attacking ISIL. U.S. troops are advising and assisting ground operations in Syria and Iraq. I'll briefly describe some of these efforts and how we're accelerating them. First, in northern Syria, local forces, with our support, are fighting along the Mara line, engaging ISIL in the last remaining pocket of access into Turkey. Meanwhile, a coalition of Syrian Arabs that we helped equip in northeastern Syria, with statutory authorizations and funds provided by Congress, for which we're grateful, are fighting alongside Kurdish forces and have recaptured important terrain, most recently pushing ISIL out of the town of al-Hol and at least 900 square kilometers of surrounding territory. They're now focused on moving south to isolate ISIL's nominal capital of Raqqa, with the ultimate objective of collapsing its control over that city. This momentum on the ground in northern Syria has been enabled by increased coalition airstrikes, as well as support on the ground. In early November, we deployed additional strike aircraft to Incirlik Air Base in Turkey. These and other aircraft in the region, combined with improved intelligence, allowed us in November to significantly increase our airstrikes against ISIL to the highest level since the start of operations in August of 2014. To build on that momentum, we're sending, on President Obama's orders and the Chairman's and my advice, Special Operations Forces personnel to Syria to support the fight against ISIL. American special operators bring a unique suite of capabilities that make them force multipliers. They will help us garner valuable ground intelligence, further enhance our air campaign, and above all, enable local forces that can regain and then hold territory occupied by ISIL. Where we find further opportunity to leverage such capability, we're prepared to expand it. Next, in the south of Syria, we're also taking advantage of opportunities to open a southern front on ISIL by enabling fighters trained and equipped by us and other coalition partners to conduct strikes inside Syria. We're also enhancing the border control and defenses of a key ally, Jordan, with additional military assets and assistance. In northern Iraq, Peshmerga units, with the help of U.S. air power and advisors, have retaken the town of Sinjar, cutting the main line of communication between Raqqa and Mosul, the two largest cities under ISIL's control. To move people and supplies, ISIL must now rely on back roads where we locate and destroy them. Elsewhere in Iraq, we have about 3,500 troops at 6 locations in Iraq in support of Iraqi security forces, the ISF. There, we've been providing increased lethal fire and augmenting the existing training, advising, and assisting program. And we're prepared to do more as Iraq shows capability and motivation in the counter-ISIL fight and in resolving its political divisions. Now, the progress in the Sunni portions of Iraq, as mentioned by Mr. Smith, as the campaign to recapture Ramadi shows, has been slow, much to our and Prime Minister Abadi's frustration. Despite his efforts, sectarian politics and Iranian influence have made building a multi-sectarian Iraqi security force difficult, with some notable exceptions such as the effective U.S.-trained counterterrorism forces. We continue to offer additional U.S. support of all kinds and urge Baghdad to enroll, train, arm, and pay Sunni Arab fighters, as well as local Sunni Arab police forces, to hold territory recaptured from ISIL. All these efforts, from northern Syria through Iraq, have shrunk the ISIL-controlled territory in both. Importantly, we now have an opportunity to divide ISIL's presence in Iraq from that in Syria. This could be important because while both countries are plagued by ISIL, each, as I said earlier, has different political pathologies that provide the opportunity for extremism, and they ultimately require different kinds of political progress to ensure lasting victory. Next, in full coordination with the government of Iraq, we're deploying a specialized expeditionary targeting force to assist Iraqi and Kurdish Peshmerga forces and put even more pressure on ISIL. These special operators will, over time, be able to conduct raids, free hostages, gather intelligence, and capture ISIL leaders. This force will also be in a position to conduct unilateral operations in Syria. That creates a virtuous cycle of better intelligence, which generates more targets, more raids, more momentum. The raids in Iraq will be done at the invitation of the Iraqi government and focused on defending its borders and building the ISF's own capability. Next, we're also significantly expanding U.S. attacks on ISIL's infrastructure and sources of revenue, particularly its oil revenue. Over the past several weeks, because of improved intelligence and understanding of ISIL's financial operations, we've intensified the air campaign against ISIL's war-sustaining oil enterprise, a critical pillar of ISIL's financial infrastructure. In addition to destroying fixed facilities like wells and processing facilities, we've destroyed nearly 400 of ISIL's oil tanker trucks, reducing a major source of its daily revenues. There's more to come, too. And we're improving our capability to eliminate ISIL's leadership by conducting raids using the expeditionary target force I discussed a moment ago, and also targeted airstrikes. Since I last appeared before this committee in June, we have removed some key ISIL figures from the battlefield. Haji Mataz, ISIL's second in command, Junaid Hussain, a key external operative actively plotting against our service members, Jihadi John, an ISIL executioner, and Abu Nabil, ISIL's leader in Libya. Like previous actions, these strikes serve notice to ISIL that no target is beyond our reach. Finally, even as we work to defeat ISIL in Syria and Iraq, where its parent tumor has grown, we also recognize ISIL has metastasized elsewhere. The threat posed by ISIL and groups like it can span regions and our own combatant commands. That's why the Defense Department is organizing a new way to leverage infrastructure we've already established in Afghanistan, the Levant, East Africa, and Southern Europe into a unified capability to counter transnational and transregional threats like ISIL. An example of this network in action was our recent strike on Abu Nabil, where assets from several locations converged to successfully kill this ISIL leader in Libya. As that strike shows, there's a lot of potential here. But to do more, we need to be creative and to consider changes to how the Defense Department works and is structured. This could be an important focus of any new Goldwater-Nichols type reforms, which I know this committee, and particularly Chairman Thornberry, is exploring. I welcome this timely review and look forward to working with you on it as we complete our own ongoing reform initiatives in the Department. These are 8 areas, just 8, of the adaptations we've made over the past 6 weeks to accelerate this campaign, and we've seen momentum build. Chairman Dunford, if I can compliment him for a moment, has been a tremendous source of actionable ideas. We've also seen real ingenuity from our team at CENTCOM and many of the other combatant commands involved in this fight. And President Obama is committed to doing what it takes. As opportunities arise, as we see what works, as the enemy adapts, and until ISIL is defeated in a lasting way. As I just explained, we're constantly looking to do more in this fight, but the world must do the same. The international community, including our allies and partners, has to step up before another attack like Paris. France has been galvanized by the attacks on its capital, and the French have intensified their role. Britain is debating expanded airstrikes. Italy has made important contributions in Iraq, and Germany is making additional contributions. But we all, let me repeat, all must do more. Turkey must do more to control its often porous border. Saudi Arabia and the Gulf states joined the air campaign in the early days, but have since been preoccupied by the conflict in Yemen. Meanwhile, Russia, which is publicly committed to defeating ISIL, has instead largely attacked opposition forces, not ISIL. It's time for Russia to focus on the right side of this fight. American leadership is essential, but the more contributions we receive from other nations, the greater combat power we can achieve using our own force. Just as importantly, we also need to leverage our allies and partners' relationships and capabilities to effectively work with Syrians and Iraqis, who in the end must expel ISIL and restore effective governance in those countries. The President, Secretary Kerry, and I have spoken to many of our counterparts, and the Chairman has as well. And we're encouraging them to provide additional strike and support aircraft, special operations personnel, deeper and more effective intelligence sharing, additional train, advise, and assist personnel and resources, combat search and rescue capabilities, combat support and combat service support, base security forces, and additional economic aid and humanitarian assistance. As I conclude, I want to commend this committee on last month's budget deal, which is the kind of deal I called for back in March before this committee. It was a consequential agreement for the nation's security, and we're grateful for it. Thank you.
Thank you. General Dunford.
Chairman Thornberry, Ranking Member Smith, distinguished members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to appear before you today to address the military dimension of our counter-ISIL strategy. Secretary Carter just provided a brief campaign update in an overview of our strategic approach. Before taking your questions, I'd like to share my perspective on the fundamentals of our counter-ISIL campaign in Iraq and Syria and what I believe you should expect as we move forward. ISIL's primary sources of strength are its claim to be a caliphate, its narrative, and its manpower. To be successful, the coalition's military campaign must reduce ISIL's territorial control, undermine its brand and aura of invincibility, and destroy its warfighting capability. There are two critical elements of the military campaign to achieve those ends. The first is to conduct strikes against ISIL targets. The strikes are intended to kill leadership and fighters, interdict their lines of communication, and deny them their sources of revenue. The second critical element in the military campaign is to develop and support effective partners on the ground to seize and secure ISIL-held terrain. The basic framework for the campaign is the same for Iraq and Syria, but the conditions on the ground present unique challenges and opportunities. Without a partner on the ground, Syria has clearly presented the most difficult challenge. Success in Syria requires working with our Turkish partners to secure the northern border of Syria, enabled vetted Syrian opposition forces that are willing to fight ISIL, and conducting strikes to attack core ISIL's command and control and sources of revenue. In Iraq, we have a partner, and success requires supporting the development of Iraqi and Kurdish security forces and enabling their operations with intelligence, advisors, logistics, and combined arms support. Having quickly outlined what we must do in a military campaign, let me provide my initial assessment of how we're doing. As with any campaign, we're continuously examining ways to enhance the effectiveness of our operations. Many weeks ago, even before I became the chairman, the leadership across the department recognized that we needed to increase pressure on ISIL by improving the effectiveness of our strikes and accelerating our efforts to develop and support effective partners on the ground. In short, we were not satisfied that we were doing everything possible to defeat the enemy. While recognizing that ISIL is a trans-regional threat requiring a broader strategy, our immediate focus was to bear down on core ISIL across Iraq and Syria simultaneously. After a lot of hard work by commanders and staffs at every level, we went to the President in early October with a number of recommendations designed to generate momentum in the campaign. The President approved our initial recommendations, and we're currently in the process of implementing his decisions. Secretary Carter provided the details of the initiative in his testimony and described where we are starting to see some positive developments and where we may see additional progress in the days ahead. While very mindful of the complex challenges that we face in this campaign, we're encouraged by the recent developments in places like Beji, Sinjar, and El Hal. To me, those operations indicate what's possible. We also believe we're having a greater effect in our strikes against ISIL's leadership and resources. In the days ahead, we'll be aggressive in looking for ways to reinforce success, and we'll seize every opportunity to increase the tempo and the effectiveness of our operations. The Secretary and the President have made it clear that they expect me to deliver all of the options that may contribute to our winning the fight against ISIL. I made a commitment to them that I would do that, and I'll reaffirm that commitment to you here this morning. In closing, as I complete my initial assessment of the campaign, I believe we've started to identify and implement a number of initiatives to move the campaign forward. We're not satisfied or complacent about where we are, and we won't be until ISIL is defeated. Thank you again for the opportunity to join you. I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, sir. As we move into questions, we need to make the most of the limited time we have with the Secretary and General Dunford. So just as a warning, we're going to have to be strict on the time. If you want to make a 4-minute speech, you're not going to get much of an answer. So let's be respectful of the time, and I want to instruct the staff to put me on the clock starting now. Mr. Secretary, I want to go back to the point that Mike Vickers made in that article. You know him, worked with him a lot in the Obama administration, and he was in the previous administration too. His point is whatever we would do if they really were successful in attacking New York and Washington, we should do now before the attack occurs, which makes a lot of sense to me. So you outlined 8 areas of adaptation, you said, of greater effort. Why weren't we doing that before?
The principal reason why we now have opportunities we haven't had in the past is twofold, Mr. Chairman. The first is the identification of ground forces, starting with Kurds in northern Syria, which I mentioned, Syrian Arab Coalition, Peshmerga and other forces, and forces in the south of Syria that are willing to fight ISIL. They have been hard to find. We've been looking for them. We've identified a number of them. By the way, we're looking for more. And we hope that the Syrian Arab Coalition, as it rolls south towards Raqqa, is like a snowball that continues to gather people who are tired of ISIL's rule, who are willing to fight ISIL, and have them join with us, enabling them and accompanying them as appropriate all the way down to Raqqa. So that's one ingredient. The other ingredient is our intelligence, which was not so great at the beginning of this, as you know, because we were surprised again and again and again, has improved tremendously. And by the way, some of that as a result of Secretary Vickers' own work. That has given us opportunities both in airstrikes and ground operations like raids and so forth that we didn't otherwise have. Those are 2 of the things that have contributed to our being able to do more. And I just want to repeat something that Chairman Dempsey, Chairman Dunford just said, which is we're looking for and finding new opportunities for actionable effort every day. And to your core point, and I guess Secretary Vickers' core point, I think that's absolutely right. We're doing everything that we possibly can to defeat this enemy. I described our strategy. I described those efforts. And we're doing everything, I should say, that will be effective, and that we judge will be effective. We're doing now, and I think to answer your question directly, that we should do everything that we can. And but Chairman Dunford's also right. I've asked him, the President asked me and him, to continue to provide him with opportunities, and he's been a tremendous, in addition to the 2 other factors I named, has been a great source of actionable ideas, in part based upon his terrific service in Afghanistan.
Well, the Defense Authorization Bill the President signed into law last week gives some additional opportunities and says basically if you find the government of Iraq is not inclusive, that arms can be provided directly to the Kurds, to Sunni tribes and others. Is that an option that you would consider recommending?
We are sending arms directly to the Kurds. The mechanism by which that works is that there is customs approval by the Iraqi government. I'll come back to why we stipulate that. But there's no delay, and there's a large number of arms and other kinds of equipment have reached the Iraqi Kurds from us, and by the way, I should say by I think more than 12 other countries. Rich source. We do that in this way through the government of Iraq, and likewise, much more slowly, and as I said, frustratingly, Sunnis through the government of Iraq, because we continue to believe that supporting a multi-sectarian approach to governance in Iraq is ultimately the most effective approach. We have considered the alternatives. I know there are other people who have considered but it is a considered judgment to try to pursue these through the government of Prime Minister Abadi. He has indicated a willingness to do that. Baghdad politics is complicated. We don't always get what we want, and that's particularly the case, as I think Representative Smith indicated, in the matter of arming, training, and equipping Sunnis.
Okay. Thank you. Ms. Smith.
Just following up on that, I think that's the clearest, well, two big problems, just two questions. One, what do we do in Iraq to find a legitimate fighting force to counter ISIL? Because it's not really coming out of Baghdad. I mean, what we were able to do during the surge some 7, 8 years ago was to get the Sunni tribes to turn on al-Qaeda at the time. And it seems to me that's the kind of thing that we're going to need to do again, is to reach out to those tribes, take advantage of overactions by ISIS groups with Baghdad. But I'm not getting a clear picture here other than what we've heard over and over and over again, which is we hope that at some point the Baghdad government actually stops persecuting Sunnis and starts including them. But there doesn't seem to be any possibility of that, and as the cliche goes, hope is not a strategy. So what is our strategy for getting Sunnis in Iraq to be willing to fight ISIS? What is just the concrete, clear plan to make that happen?
The concrete, clear plan has 4 streams by which we're trying to get Sunnis included in the fight there, and let me just go through them. The first is through the Iraqi security forces themselves, which are now in sectarian terms about 20% Sunni. That's one of the seeds of this whole problem from the beginning in the collapse of the Iraqi security forces. At our training sites, we have trained Iraqi security forces, including Sunnis, and they are joining the fight, notably in the area of Ramadi. We'd like more. Our training sites are turning them out every month. That's the first stream. Second stream is the tribal fighters, as you indicated, and they are, first of all, the Popular Mobilization Force, which is a kind of militia type force, not independent of the Iraqi government. And the Iraqi government, and this is where we have a problem, has authorized many more Shia than Sunni PMF. We need them to authorize more Sunni PMF, then we're prepared to train them. Those are the so-called tribal fighters that you indicated. Right. Third is the Iraqi Counterterrorism Service, which we have trained and is the most effective force in the fight. And finally, there's Peshmerga in the north, who have been extremely effective. And the last thing I'll say, and I know I'm going on a bit, but this is complicated, is we are also working with Sunni police. This is important, because remember, ISIL is in Sunni territory. So it's not going to work for Shia forces to participate in holding and governing those. We need Sunni police forces in the end, and we're working on them too, so that when Ramadi is recaptured, and ultimately when Mosul is recaptured, the peace can be kept there by people who are local Sunni and recognizable to local personnel.
Yeah. In Syria, the big challenge there is, like I said, we're fighting both ISIS and Assad. And I don't think we really succeed against ISIS until we remove Assad. And again, and I know we're talking with our allies and working on that. Russia's a huge problem because despite what they say, their plan is simple. They're going to try to keep Assad no matter what. Iran, same story. And that just, perpetuates the fight. What is the hope and the plan for getting us? Because I think the key here is to get Russia and Iran to realize that Assad is not going to be able to protect their interests. I mean, he can't right now because he can't control his country. How do we get to the point where we get a replacement for Assad to sort of take that wind out of ISIS's sails and present a more representative coalition government?
Well, you're right. The political transition in Syria is essential to ultimately resolving the civil war there. It is the civil war that fuels ISIL, that fuels al-Nusra, that fuels all this extremism. It has been the civil war there. And there's a political transition in which moderate opposition and some of the structures of the Syrian government, not Bashar Assad, but constitute a new government of Syria that can restore some decency and some governance to the territory of Syria. That's the transition we're looking for. Now, you ask about the Russians. The Russians have a lot of influence with Assad. They're using it in the wrong way.
Yes.
And I've said this repeatedly. The Russians are wrong-headed in their strategy. They're going at it backwards. They had said they were going to go in to fight ISIL and promote a political transition. They've backed Assad and targeted people who are part of the opposition that needs to be part of Syria's future. So they're off on the wrong foot, and for us to associate ourselves with what they're doing, they'd have to get on the wrong foot, the right foot, rather.
Thank you.
Mr. Jones.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. And Mr. Secretary, General Dunford, thank you so much for being here today, your leadership. I listened to your testimony. I read in the papers, and we've had classified briefings. Y'all have got an unbelievable, complex task in behalf of the American people, and certainly our military. Thank you. We, a few of us, back when Mr. Boehner was the Speaker, asked for a debate on the floor of the House for a new AUMF, Authorization of Military Force. In fact, while he was still Speaker of the House, he related to the President that you need to send us a new AUMF, which President Obama did in February of this year, 2015. Since becoming the new Speaker of the House, 22 Republicans and Democrats wrote to Mr. Ryan, and I just want to read one sentence and then I'm going to get to my question. And we wrote this on November the 6th. Taken all together, these represent a significant escalation of United States military operations in the region and place U.S. military personnel on the front lines of combat operation. We hear from the Senate that they say we need to put boots on the ground. We continue to not meet our constitutional responsibility. And before I get to the question, I want to remind the American people what James Madison said. The power to declare war, including the power of judging the causes of war, is fully and exclusively vested in the legislature, not the executive branch, but the legislature. I would like to ask you and General Dunford, in this undertaking of trying to defeat this evil group known as ISIL, would it help your cause if the Congress met its constitutional responsibility of debating a new AUMF? Would it give strength to what you're trying to do, especially with these other countries who are our allies? Would it help you in this fight to defeat ISIL if the Congress would meet its constitutional responsibility? And I would appreciate a statement from each one of you. Thank you.
Okay. Well, I'll go first. The President has submitted an AUMF. I looked at it carefully. This was some months ago. I testified about it, and I said I asked myself two questions. The first was whether the AUMF, as the President proposed it, would give us the authority to conduct the campaign that is necessary to defeat ISIL. And without going into the details, my answer to that was yes. The one he submitted did. Not every one that everyone else has proposed would. That one did. But the second thing I asked myself was, would this show to our troops that their country is behind them? I think they know we're behind them. I think they know you're behind them. Would this show that the country was behind them in their effort? I think they deserve to know that. And for that reason, I think it's desirable to have an AUMF. The only thing I'd say is the lawyers tell me that we don't technically need one. So I'll just add that. We can conduct what we need to do within the law. But I think it would be helpful, principally because I think you can't do enough to show the troops that we're behind them and that this is a big deal and it's serious and the country is behind them. Chairman.
Sir, I have a similar answer. It's my understanding that we currently have all the authorities that we need to prosecute the campaign against ISIL. But I absolutely believe that a clear and unequivocal statement of support for the men and women that are prosecuting the campaign and our allies from their elected officials would be absolutely helpful.
Mr. Chairman, since I took all my time last, I want you to know I can do it under 5 minutes, so therefore I yield back 51 seconds. Thank you.
Thanks for being a good example. Ms. Sanchez.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And thank you, gentlemen, once again for being before us. I had several questions, some of which have already been answered, but let me add a couple and see what you're thinking of. You said that we are now arming the Kurds. The last time I talked to Barzani, he suggested that they needed heavier duty weapons versus light arms. And so my first question would be, what are we arming them with? I mean, is it really for the battlefield that they find? Secondly, I'd like you to address this whole issue with respect to the Iraqi army and the inability for us to really get it integrated, or for Iraq's government to get it integrated. I remember back in under the Constitution and under the deal, the whole issue of, for example, having a vote on the Kurd area being an independent entity, for example. That was something that I continued to ask our military leaders at the time who were overseeing Iraq, and the reality was they kept saying, that's the hardest part, that's the hardest part, we're going to get to it. We never got to it, and we left. So now we see the fruits of that, in the sense that we still are not able to get to have a military or police force that's very integrated. So what do we do about that? So we've been taking back territory in Iraq, and one of the issues that we had is it always takes additional, we need to leave troops there, or we need to leave somebody there in order to hold on to it. Otherwise, we end up losing that territory. So what is our strategy to do that? And the recruitment effort, I would like, and I'm sure that it would be not within the public realm, but I would love to get a brief on the cyber issues and how we're countering the recruitment effort with respect to ISIS, ISIL, whatever you want to call them these days, from a global perspective. But in particular, are we doing anything that you can talk about in this setting with respect to the recruitment effort in the region itself? And lastly, DIME, diplomacy, intelligence, military, economic. It's not just military that we need here. So, Secretary, if you could speak a little to what are some of the other efforts that we're doing to counteract what is really something we need to eliminate, which is ISIS. Thank you.
Congressman Sanchez, I'll touch on a few of the points and ask the chairman, especially with respect to arming the Kurds, if you don't mind, Mr. Chairman, and generally the Iraqi security forces. You talk about DIME. Absolutely, it's essential that we recognize that even though we, I believe this is absolutely true, are the center of the campaign, because there must be a military defeat of ISIL. And I also believe that Iraq and Syria, since it is the heart of ISIL, we have to defeat it there. That said, this is a global fight. It's a multidimensional fight. It's in the intelligence sphere, it's in the homeland security sphere, it's in the law enforcement sphere, and I won't go into much more to say about that, except that I have begun to convene with Secretary Kerry, and I appreciate his cooperation in this regard, all of the agencies, and going through what we're all doing and making sure the right hand knows what the left is. So, for example, in cyber, you're right, I can't talk about it here. I'm happy to come give you a classified briefing, but we are linked up in that. It's very important. The FBI, Jim Comey, Homeland Security, the intelligence community, and our DOD people. Last thing I'll say is, you ask, have we thought about a hold force? The necessity for a hold force is at the root of our strategy. Our strategy is to find, identify, and enable forces that can not only take territory, but hold territory. Because we know from the last 14 years that that's the tricky part. The hard part about getting victory to stick is to find people who can hold territory and govern it decently so that the likes of ISIL don't come back. And as I said, they're hard to find. They do exist, but they're hard to find, and we're going to try to make a snowball and get more. Chairman.
Congresswoman, with regard to the Kurds have, as you know, you've been there many times, a full range of heavy weapons, heavy vehicles, and our assessment is they have the capability to take the fight to ISIL. And in fact, their recent success in Sinjar demonstrates that. I was over in October, and I did speak to President Barzani. He identified some additional support that he wanted, some specific ammunition types that he felt like he didn't have in sufficient quantities, and we were working to immediately address that shortfall. So my assessment is they have the military capability to do what must be done, and we're additionally providing aviation support and other combined arms capabilities.
Mr. Chairman, General, if you'd like to amplify, please feel free, but we'll try to keep us close to on time. Mr. Forbes.
General Dunford, you heard the chairman's admonishment of staying within 5 minutes, so I'm going to ask you to have your answers as succinct as possible, and if you want to elaborate, you can do that in writing. You heard the Secretary of Defense today say both in writing and verbally that we are at war. Who declared that war?
Chairman or Representative Forbes, I think what the Secretary is saying, because we've discussed this, is we view the fight against ISIL as a threat to the United States, and we are mobilizing all of the military capabilities that are necessary.
Who would have actually made that declaration? Is that something you would make, the Secretary would make?
If it was a technical declaration of war, it would be the Congress.
But has that declaration been made?
No, it has not.
So then how does the Secretary say we're at war?
Well, why didn't the Secretary say for
I understand,
himself?
but I only have 5 minutes.
Well, I'm just going to tell you, by doing that, I'm not being
I would ask the
technical.
Secretary if he wants to elaborate, he can do it in writing. He's taking my 5 minutes. General Dunford, can you tell me, if as the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs, if you know?
We are technically not at war,
Okay.
Representative Forbes.
So if we're effectively not at war, let me ask you this.
declared war.
Have we currently contained ISIL?
We have not contained ISIL.
Have they been contained at any time since 2010?
Tactically, in areas they have been. Strategically, they have spread since 2010.
Can you ask me if our current strategy, in your best personal and professional military judgment that we've currently implemented, do we have a strategy that will defeat and destroy ISIL?
I think the right components of a strategy are in place, Representative Forbes.
Is that the strategy that was recommended by the Joint Chiefs?
The current strategy, and particularly the military dimension of the strategy, is the strategy that was recommended by the Joint Chiefs.
Do you have any knowledge of whether your predecessor was ever consulted from 2010 until he left office regarding the appropriate strategy for dealing with ISIL in his best personal professional military judgment or the best personal military judgment of the Joint Chiefs?
I'm confident that he was routinely consulted.
Do you have any knowledge as to whether he was consulted?
I do. I was a member of the Joint Chiefs at the same time.
Was the strategies implemented since 2010 the strategies that were recommended by the Joint Chiefs?
I can't speak to all the way back to 2010, Congressman Ford.
How long were you on the Joint Chiefs?
11 months before assuming my current position.
During that 11 months, were the strategies implemented at that time the strategies that were recommended by the Joint Chiefs?
We didn't make a recommendation on a strategy during those 11 months. The only recommendations we made happened subsequent to that time, which is when I was the chairman.
And, General, in your best personal, professional military judgment, do you believe our strategies since 2010 were the appropriate military strategies to defeat and destroy ISIL?
Congressman Forbes, I think we have the right elements of the strategy in place today.
Did we have them since 2010?
I don't believe the campaign was fully resourced since 2010.
Yeah, good. Mr. Chairman, with that, I yield back. Thank you, General. And feel free to elaborate on any that you want to in writing.
Mr. Secretary, if there's something you want
Yes.
to say about the comments about...
No, I
please
just want
go
to be
ahead.
candid. I'm not using this in some technical sense, but this is serious business.
And
so
Mr. Secretary-
to me, that's what I mean by war. It feels like that to our people who are engaged in it, and it has that kind of gravity. So it's not a technical thing. It's a descriptive.
And, Mr. Chairman, since I have 60 seconds left, in all due respect to the Secretary, the word war is not just some light term. When we use war, it is a technical word, and it needs to be used very, very carefully, I think, whether we use it in this committee or use it elsewhere. And with that, I yield back.
Okay. Ms. Davis.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to both of you, of course, for being here and the challenges that you're facing. I wanted to go back to the AUMF for a second, because I know that you've said that you have whatever you need, basically, in terms of the authorities, and yet I have an understanding that in Afghanistan, for example, that in fact we've had some inability to act preemptively. Would that be the case in any way?
Since General Dunford was our commander there, I think he's probably in the best position to, I don't know how I could answer that.
Congresswoman Davis, Afghanistan is a declared area of hostilities, and certainly as the commander there, I didn't have any restrictions on my ability to act when there was a threat to U.S. forces or to the mission.
And again, preemptively, that was not a problem.
Absolutely. I mean, if we had actionable intelligence that there was a threat to the force or a threat to the mission, or frankly, during my time in Afghanistan, a threat to Afghan security forces, we were authorized to act against individuals or groups designated as hostile.
All right, thank you. I appreciate that. There seemed to be some misunderstanding at some point. I also wanted to just go back. You talked about the oil infrastructure campaign, and I'm wondering whether there was some decision not to act as quickly in that regard as perhaps we could have, while there was, it could be considered a longer wait to do that, and what the impacts of that actually are in terms of impact on the pocketbook, of course, of ISIL, on the oil trade, and what impact that might have on the future, actually, of the region itself, of the Sunni regions.
Congressman Davis, I'll start with that. Back in the spring, a detailed analysis was done in conjunction with the State Department on the oil infrastructure in Syria and Iraq, but in Syria, to identify the critical nodes that, if targeted, would have the greatest impact against the revenue stream of ISIL. And so over the course of a couple of months, that was heavily studied and then brought to Secretary Carter and Secretary Kerry about 4 weeks ago. We had been striking oil infrastructure, but we were able to do it in a much more sophisticated, much more effective way subsequent to that study being completed. So that's why you've seen a significant increase in the tempo of our strikes over the past couple of weeks. We estimate that approximately 43% of the revenue stream that ISIL derives from oil has been affected over the past 30 days. And we're continuing now to aggressively pursue not only strikes against their oil revenue, but also their cement and other industries from which they draw their primary funds.
Anything else, and in terms of the cooperation with allies in that regard as well?
The coalition, we have what's called an air tasking order. So the coalition is integrated into that air tasking order. They conduct strikes, and the coalition is also supporting the strikes that we are conducting against the infrastructure.
Thank you. And I want to shift just quickly. I mean, what are your concerns about Pakistan's commitment to eliminating terrorist organizations?
Well, we hosted Pakistani leaders here in Washington, the chairman and I, of course, the president, just in recent weeks. And we do press them on the need to fight terrorists and to recognize that terrorism is a threat to Pakistan as well as to its neighbors, and, by the way, I should add, to U.S. forces in the region. So we are concerned about it. We do press them on that and urge them to recognize what we think is true, which is that that is, in fact, the principal threat to the Pakistani state today comes from terrorists organizations within. Chairman?
Congresswoman Davis, I mean, we're never satisfied with the level of cooperation and support that we have from Pakistan, but we do have open lines of communication. As Secretary Carter said, we recently had the Pakistanis here. I met with my counterpart, General Raheel.
Yes, and I know, and the chairman also hosted, yes.
And what I do believe is that over the past 18 to 24 months in particular, the Pakistanis realized that violent extremism presents an existential threat to the state of Pakistan. And I think as a result, the level of cooperation has improved over the past year and a half or 2 years. It is not today, in my assessment, what it needs to be in order for us to be effective, and we'll continue to work with our Pakistani partners to make sure that it gets better.
Thank you. Are there any tools that we could be using, should be using to gain more support?
If y'all would submit those in written form, I'd appreciate it. Mr. Miller.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Secretary, who does it feel like we're at war with?
ISIL and its accompanying, and by the way, I wasn't speaking of myself. and I don't use this word lightly. I'm talking to the troops who are involved in it, Congressman. So I think that's who feels that they're at
No,
war.
I understand, but who's the enemy?
The enemy is ISIL and associated groups, extremists.
Have you ever heard any member of Congress say we're at war with Muslims?
No.
Why would the President on foreign soil last week say that, quote, GOP's rhetoric has become the most potent recruitment tool for the militant group? Why would he say that?
I can't say, I'm not familiar with that quote by the President. What I do know the President has said in the past, which is obviously true, is that we recognize that this is not Islam per se that stands behind the Islamic State. It is a particular group of very radical extremists. And that's an important distinction to make. I don't know. I've always heard the President make that distinction.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. I don't even think he uses the word radical extremists, but I think it's pretty disingenuous when he makes this into a political football using language on foreign soil that has never been said for political purposes. This committee tries not to do that, and I think the President should do the exactly same thing. He also said that we're gaining, and you did as well, that we're gaining background that ISIS has taken and that it's diminishing their recruiting capacity, implying that it's harder for them to recruit fighters. So my question is it a bigger recruiting tool for attacks like Paris or expanding their territory? Because the President has said, and others have implied, that as the area shrinks, it's harder for them to recruit, and they are losing fighters.
I'll start, and then the Chairman can pitch in. I do think that attacks like Paris are aimed at and probably have some effect on recruiting to the cause people worldwide who observe that. Young radicals, we've had some in our own country who have watched the television, been on the internet. Within Syria and Iraq, recruiting for fighters on the ground there, we are trying to dry up that supply of recruits, both by making it harder to get into Syria and by destroying them when they're there, as well as the ultimate, which is to create local forces and a local system of governance that is more attractive to people than joining these violent extremists. Chairman?
Congressman, I believe that what ISIL is trying to do is again, advance a narrative of inevitable success and invincibility. And so I'd expect that they will do two things. One, continue to grab territory and establish the caliphate, and also conduct external operations that will incentivize others to join the movement and also attract resources to the movement.
General, which do you think they will focus on? Will they do it simultaneously? Regaining territory or increasing broader attacks here and other places?
Congressman, I think they're the ultimate opportunists, and they will take advantage of all of the above whenever the opportunity presents itself.
Thank you. Yield back.
Mr. Langevin.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary, and General, thank you for your testimony today. I'd like to turn my attention first to your statement, page 3, General, you're talking about the expeditionary targeting force, and in particular it says the special operators will over time be able to conduct raids, free hostages, gather intelligence, and capture ISIL leaders. That creates a virtuous cycle of better intelligence, which generates more targets, more raids, and more momentum. The line that was in the statement, but you didn't mention in your oral testimony, was that this force will also be in a position to conduct unilateral operations into Syria. I thought that was significant. I just wanted to explore that a bit. Exactly what does that mean, and what will those, how extensive will those types of raids be?
That is true. That is in the statement. It's very important. We've obviously conducted such raids already. If you remember the raid that led to the killing of Abu Sayyaf and the capture of his wife and a young Yazidi woman who was being held as a slave, a raid into Syria in which we freed 70 prisoners who were going to be executed and actually lost an American service member heroically in that action. And this is important. This is an important capability because it takes advantage of what we're good at. We're good at intelligence. We're good at mobility. We're good at surprise. We have the long reach that no one else has. And it puts everybody on notice in Syria that you don't know at night who's going to be coming in the window. And that's the sensation that we want all of ISIL's leadership and followers to have. So it's an important capability. Let me ask the chairman if he wants to elaborate on that.
No, I think the one point that you've highlighted, Mr. Secretary, is the intelligence piece, and I think that's the most important thing. Our effectiveness is obviously inextricably linked to the quality of intelligence we have, and our assessment is that this force and the operations this force will conduct will provide us additional intelligence that will make our operations much more effective, and I think that's what the Secretary refers to when he talks about the virtuous cycle.
So do you expect that these raids, this use of special forces going to Syria are going to increase exponentially, or will the primary focus be within Iraq itself?
Congressman, our operations will be intel-driven. The enemy doesn't respect boundaries, neither do we. We're fighting a campaign across Iraq and Syria, so we're going to go where the enemy is, and we're going to conduct operations where they most effectively degrade the capabilities of the enemy.
Okay. To what extent are the financial flows behind each of the bad actors present in Syria, including ISIL, vulnerable to interdiction, and to what extent are we, our allies, and our partners disrupting those flows?
I'll start. The chairman spoke of the oil infrastructure previously, and as we learn more, we're better able to target that part of critical infrastructure like oil. The chairman mentioned cement also, which turns out to be a big source of revenue for ISIL. And also that precision allows us to strike those parts of the oil infrastructure that are fueling the revenues of ISIL. We don't wish to destroy the entire oil revenue infrastructure of Syria or Iraq, because someday those countries are going to need to be restored to decent governance. But we have to destroy that which fuels ISIL, and we're getting better at distinguishing those two. And that better intelligence, that better insight is what has allowed us to take this next step, and I think it's going to be pretty effective, and we're looking to do more.
Just a quick follow-up, Congressman. Just to be clear, we do assess today that the majority of the revenue that core ISIL has is generated from within Iraq and Syria in the ways that the Secretary outlined. Oil industry primarily, other industries like cement, and then taxes on local people. And some of those taxes were actually taxes on resources paid by the government of Iraq and Syria. So we've been able to kind of stop that as well. So I do think that we're in a position and have, over the past several weeks, had a pretty significant impact on the revenue source of core ISIL.
So my last question. We've talked about this morning about surrounding nations in the region being more on the same page and going after targeting ISIL, particularly the Sunni states in the area. How do we get them to make this their first priority, given the fact that Saudi Arabia, for example, their primary concern is Iran and expansion?
In view of the time, it's a very important question. Why don't I take it for the record? We'll get back to you in written form.
Thank you.
Very important question.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Wilson.
Mr. Secretary General, thank you for being here. And General Dunford, I have had the opportunity to represent Parris Island. And so I know firsthand how working with young people, you transform them into extraordinary people with the highest level of fulfillment that they could ever achieve. And so it's just awesome what the Marine Corps does. I appreciate both of you making recommendations to the President to protect American families from further attacks. But the President has established a legacy of failure, not accepting common sense proposals to promote peace. This was cited last week by the Washington Post editorial page editor Fred Hyatt, who courageously confirmed, quote, he withdrew all U.S. troops from Iraq when experts advised that a residual force of 15,000 would help keep a fragile peace. He bombed Libya to overthrow its dictator, but opposed a small NATO training force that might have stabilized the new government. With the President not accepting your recommendations, Mr. Secretary, there are plans for the deployment of approximately 50 Special Operations soldiers to northern Syria to advise and assist Kurdish and Arab fighters fighting ISIS or Daesh. The White House press secretary has said these Special Operations forces will be able to assess the situation on the ground and help local fighters with operational planning, tactics, and logistics. Given the complicated socio-political divide between the Kurds and the local Syrian forces, do you believe that this will be successful, and what are the decision points for this strategy?
Well, we do believe it has every chance of being successful, but this is a transactional relationship with these forces, wherein we provide them some support, we provide them some equipment, and we see how they do. And in fact, that's what we're doing all over. So far, they have shown a willingness to take territory, made good use of our equipment, and that's the reason why we're prepared to do more with them. And by the way, as I said, I hope it will be like a snowball. If they do well, we'll do more. That'll gather more fighters into their movement. And of course, where we would like them to go down is to Raqqa and reclaim this so-called capital of the so-called caliphate. But it's very transactional because we have to see how they're doing and what their level of motivation and effectiveness is.
And of course, it's bipartisan. We want you to be successful. Mr. Secretary, on the basis of this hearing is to determine the suitable strategy to deal with ISIS in Iraq and Syria. Most recently, we've seen ISIS spread terror beyond the region. The President has stated on a number of occasions that ISIS is contained. Senator Dianne Feinstein, Democrat of California, the ranking member of the Senate Intelligence Committee, has expressed a sense of urgency. Recently, she said, quote, "We have to be prepared for an ISIS attack on the U.S. homeland. I've never been more concerned." Senator Feinstein said, quote, "I read the intelligence faithfully." And then she added, "ISIL is not contained. ISIL is expanding." Her comments serve as a direct rebuttal to the President's statement. Just hours before the mass murders in Paris, we had, quote, "From the start, our goal has been to contain ISIS and keep them contained," end of quote. What specifically does containment of ISIS mean to you? And in practical terms, what is DOD doing that it should do to contain ISIS?
Well, our strategy is to destroy ISIL. In Syria and Iraq and anywhere else it arises. And with respect to the homeland, while we don't have any credible imminent threats that I can relate to you today, fortunately, we do take Homeland Security very seriously, and we particularly take the protection of our own personnel seriously for, among other reasons, the fact that they were, many of them were singled out by these guys like Junaid Hussain, who were trying to recruit Americans. A few months ago, I went to Chattanooga on a Sunday afternoon, where there was a ceremony for 6 of our service members, gunned down by somebody who'd been radicalized basically online, born and raised in Chattanooga, Tennessee. So this is serious business, the violent extremist tendencies. And while we need to get its heart in Syria and Iraq, we need to recognize that this metastasizes elsewhere and protect ourselves and protect our people.
Thank you very much.
Ms. Bordallo.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, Secretary Carter, and General Dunford. Thank you very much for being at the hearing this morning. Gentlemen, having just returned last week from a congressional trip to Afghanistan, Egypt, and Saudi Arabia, with our mission being, our main mission being the influence of ISIL in this region, I came back, and this is a personal observation, with the idea that we have to step up or accelerate our strategies with the assistance of our allies, of course. Air power, sea power, boots on the ground. And one thing that was brought out in all of the country briefings in these countries was the sharing of intelligence information. It's not up to par. And if we can accelerate with all of this power with our allies, I think it would be one way to wipe out this barbarian group once and for all. Gentlemen, the entire world is on alert. The American people are on edge. There are ISIL cells in our states here in America. So I'm just wondering what your ideas are on accelerating this mission that we have to wipe out ISIL, and what about the intelligence information sharing?
Hey, Congresswoman, I'll come to the intel piece first. First of all, I think your observation is actually exactly right on the mark and is a fact. And in the wake of Paris, that's been one of the things that was identified. We have a reasonably good information sharing within the United States across the interagency. Certainly not perfect, but we work that pretty hard every day. As you saw in the wake of Paris, other nations not only have a challenge sharing information with other countries, but they have difficulty sharing information with other agencies within the same country. That has been recognized as an issue. Certainly, as Secretary Carter and I work on one of the more fundamental issues, the foreign fighter issue, that has been identified as probably the single biggest thing that inhibits our ability to stop the flow of foreign fighters is information and intelligence sharing across all the countries that are affected. And we think there's at least 100, maybe to 120 countries that have individuals who have actually gone to Syria and Iraq to fight and presumably will return home at some point. And so there is a strong imperative to do that. With regard to accelerating the campaign, you know, Secretary Carter and I have talked about what we are doing inside of Iraq and Syria, but also recognize that this is a trans-regional threat that requires a global strategy. And as we are conducting operations in Syria and Iraq, and as we are trying to create pressure simultaneously across ISIL in Iraq and Syria, we're trying to do the same thing in all the other locations where ISIL exists. And we assess today there's certainly a number of branches that are sanctioned by ISIL and a number of other groups that are striving to become part of ISIL.
Thank you very much, General. I do agree with much of what was said today, and I do know that I understand the difficulties and challenges in dealing with different cultures in different countries, but I really think that, you know, it's going beyond what we ever expected, and now we're just all up in the air about whether this is going to hit our own country. So I just hope that we can work together and try to beef up. We have been with our allies now for a long time. Many of them, we're training their troops. So I do think we're ready to step it up and once and for all wipe out this barbarian group. And I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Thank the gentlelady. Ms. Turner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Secretary, I know you're aware of the fact that there have been allegations that intelligence officials at CENTCOM have skewered findings on the ISIS war to please their superiors and to please those in Washington. I'm holding a Daily Beast article from November 23rd. It says, analysts accuse CENTCOM of covering up cooked ISIS intelligence. The article goes on to say that the Inspector General is looking into CENTCOM's perhaps cooking the intelligence to make the picture more rosy than what is occurring. And it goes on to have a concern that, in fact, emails and documents may have been deleted before they were turned over to investigators concerning the CENTCOM doctoring or making more rosy appearance. In fact, the chairman I said on the Intelligence Committee also, the chairman of the Intelligence Committee has sent to the Inspector General a letter inquiring about the allegations of those documents having been deleted. Now, I said on the Intelligence Committee. I've also attended the classified portions of briefings at this committee, and you've said you can only go into so far in this hearing. In your written testimony, you say some of this is I can only tell you what's unclassified, but you say we are gathering momentum on the battlefield in Syria and Iraq. You say all these efforts from northern Syria through Iraq have shrunk the ISIL-controlled territory in both. Mr. Secretary, you can understand my concern that while we have allegations that CENTCOM is doctoring intelligence to make things a rosy picture, and while you sit before us and say we're gathering momentum and their footprint has shrunk, while General Dunford sitting next to you has admitted that ISIL is not contained, that we're all a little concerned that you're giving us a rosy picture. And I personally believe, I think as many do, that not only do we not really have a strategy, but you can't have a strategy unless it's based on an accurate picture of what's happening and the threat that we have. Mr. Secretary, how do you respond to the allegations that the Department of Defense, CENTCOM, perhaps even your own testimony today, is painting a much rosier picture than what we're facing?
Well, first of all, with respect to intelligence, and I insist upon accurate, candid advice from the intelligence community, and I don't rely upon just one.
I appreciate that commitment, Mr. Secretary, but the question is about ISIL and Syria and Iraq. You've made statements here in your written testimony that their footprint is shrinking, has been shrunk. General Dunford saying they're not contained. You say that we are gathering momentum. I know everybody has been in the classified briefings that we've had here. No one has ever said that to us before. And when you put that in the same context of CENTCOM having allegations that they've doctored intelligence as to what the circumstances are, I think you have somewhat of a high bar to pass to be able to sit in front of us and tell us that the battlefield is turning our direction. How do you justify that?
Well, let's just be clear about what I said. The territory under ISIL's control has shrunk. That's a fact. And that's not a fact that I would suggest is the end of the story. I tell you, we need more momentum. We need to keep that up. So I'm very careful.
Who controls the territory where it has shrunk in Syria?
Kurds, for example.
And in Iraq?
Kurds also, for example.
So and was that part?
That's a fact. Is there still a lot farther to go? You bet there is. And I'm committed, and I will be, and I have been, absolutely candid with you. I expect intelligence officials to be candid with me. I can't comment on an Inspector General investigation.
So, Mr. Secretary,
but I will tell you that
it's my time. So it's your testimony here today because the Kurds have made advances, that we have momentum, and that ISIL is shrinking.
For that and a number of other reasons, we are gathering momentum, and it is a fact that the territory under ISIL's control has shrunk. That's not a declaration of victory. You've
indicated that it's war. Are we winning, Mr. Secretary?
We will win.
Are we winning now?
We're going to win.
Well, Mr. Secretary, most of us on both sides of the aisle do not have confidence that you have a strategy and that you do not have a strategy based on an accurate assessment. I think your presentation here today shows a disconnect between what all the information that we're receiving and really what's being placed into the United States effort. I yield back.
Mr. Courtney.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to thank both witnesses for their testimony today, particularly the, in my opinion, very powerful statement that both of you articulated about the fact that Congress is, if we want to do something on our side of the witness table, we need to act. We need to move forward on authorization of use of force, and the General's comments in terms of the impact that would have on those wearing the uniform that are out there taking the fight. Frankly, I just hope people will take that to heart. The finger pointing and chest thumping that goes on up here sometimes at the same time that we have been sitting since February when the President sent over language for an authorization of use of force and then have done nothing is just totally inexcusable and unacceptable. I want to, though, point or just focus for a moment on the fact that we did actually in 2014 move forward on Title X authorization, which was incorporated into the NDAA that gave authority for train and equip operations. You alluded to it, Mr. Secretary, in terms of that program. Again, the out-of-country training seemed to have sort of fizzled out, but the fact, I guess the question I want to ask is that a dead letter now, or are you using it in other ways to, again, take the fight to ISIL?
Well, we are continuing to train and equip forces. We're doing it in different ways as we learn more. And we are now, particularly in Syria, we have found groups that already exist and are fighting, and which we can enable with special capabilities and train people specially to accompany them, or send Americans to accompany them. That is preferable to trying to create entirely new units by taking individuals out of the country and trying to put them together. We're still, we will continue, we're going to try everything that works. So we are doing some of the latter down in southern Syria and having some success at doing that, at forming units to fight ISIL. But we're also continue to look and to find forces that are willing to fight ISIL and to give them the equipment, the training, and the enabling that will allow them to be successful. And we're doing that all over Syria and all over Iraq, and that's the key to getting a continued momentum. Chairman, anything to add to that?
Congressman, I think the thing that's important is that we are going to need indigenous ground forces and regional ground forces to be successful. So it really is a question, as the Secretary outlined. We've changed the method of developing those indigenous ground forces, but the end state has remained consistent, and the authorities that we have in the NDAA are exactly the ones we need to continue to progress. And I'll give you an example. We were training individuals. We brought them into Turkey. We tried to send them back into the fight in Syria. We didn't believe that that was going to get us to where we needed to be as fast as we needed to get there. So we decided to go with vetted groups, and we're currently supporting the Syrian Arab Coalition, which is actually one of the groups that's had some success in Al-Hol and is moving now down towards Raqqa, which is where core ISIL resides. That authority is what we're using to support those forces right now.
And I appreciate you mentioning that specific scenario, because, again, I think it shows that, there are tangible results when we moved as a Congress on a bipartisan basis to give you the tools to succeed. And that's why it's really not just a cable news debating topic here in terms of authorization. I mean, there is real value in terms of helping us accomplish the goal here is as Congress, listening to the military needs and moving forward and giving people the tools to succeed. And the taking of Al-Hol is a perfect example of that, which, again, is there's no intelligence question about whether that happened. I mean, it's been reported in every sort of international media out there. It succeeded, and we should be looking for those opportunities on our side of the witness table in terms of giving you the tools to move forward. And with that, I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Klein.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, gentlemen, for being here today. I'm going to take a few seconds to weigh in on the "Are we at war?" question, which was so busily discussed up here on the top row. If you go back to the 9/11 Commission report, they very clearly stated that we are at war, that we have an enemy, it's Islamic terrorists, and that they are waging war against us. And I would argue that they are continuing to wage war against us, so whether we like it or not, we're in a war. Having said that, I think it would be very, very useful if we would indeed debate and pass a new authorization for the use of military force to clear up this kind of esoteric discussion. General Dunford, when I was in Baghdad a few months ago, I was talking to American troops, and even though we theoretically don't have troops on the ground, there were some 3,500 American troops on the ground. But I was told, well, we can't have any more than that. We're limited. And so my question is that true? Are we limited in what we do by a number, whether it's 3,500, maybe now it's 3,550 if we're sending some special operating forces over there? Are we limited to a number?
Congressman, thanks for asking that question. I've had that conversation with our commanders on the ground as well. I do not believe we are limited by the number 3,500. We are managing 3,500 because that's the numbers of troops that the President has approved to date. But I can assure you that I don't feel at all inhibited about making recommendations that would cause us to grow greater than 3,500 were I to believe that would help us to defeat ISIL. And I've told our commanders, to include General McFarland as recently as 10 days ago, to not be inhibited at all in identifying to me the capabilities he needs on the ground, regardless of the force management level, which is really what you're referring to, that 3,500, in that I will bring those options to the Secretary and the President.
Well, I'm only somewhat relieved to hear that, because I hate to think that we're down to managing a number where you have to go to the President of the United States to go from 3,500 to 3,600 or to 3,700 to 3,800. And right now, it's my understanding, for example, if you needed to, you couldn't move in a battalion of attack helicopters or combat search and rescue or something to be stationed in and around Baghdad. And you and I, frankly, have had this discussion before, including about Afghanistan. I just think it's a terrible imposition on the military campaign to complete a strategy which I, like others, am not at all convinced we really have at this point, but presumably you've got a strategy to fight and win. If you need the forces to do it, it seems to me you ought to be able to move those forces without having to go to the President of the United States and say, I need another 25 people. And I would make the same argument about Afghanistan. I don't know how we got it. Actually, I do know how we got a number that's below 10,000. But my point is that we're getting numbers. You, the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs, the Secretary of Defense, and others are being asked to wage a campaign based on a cap of numbers in a country. And if that's not true, now you say you feel comfortable in going to the President of the United States and saying we need some more numbers, but right now, General Oster or anybody else can't send in a battalion, a company, if he feels he needs it in Baghdad. Is that correct?
Congress, if I could just quickly respond. I view my responsibility to identify to the President and the Secretary the capabilities that the commanders need to accomplish the mission. And I can assure you that I will not be at all inhibited in bringing those recommendations forward to the President and the Secretary, regardless of what the force management levels or the numbers may have been articulated as in the past. I will not feel at all constrained in bringing forward recommendations for additional capabilities if that's what it takes us to defeat the enemy.
Well, the way you put that is exactly correct. It's additional capabilities. It's not numbers. If you need the capability to conduct combat search and rescue in a reasonable amount of time, and flying from Kuwait to western Iraq, to me, is not a reasonable amount of time if you have to go and rescue a downed pilot. If you need that capability, it seems to me, Chairman of the Joint Chiefs, that needs to be recommended. If you don't think so, I'm a little bit surprised, because from what I hear in visits there and talk to others, is there's a sense on the ground that they need some more capability. So please, 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 do not hesitate to make the recommendation to get the capability we need, whether it's in Afghanistan or whether it's in Iraq and Syria, and let's get out of managing by the dad-burn numbers. I yield back.